It started because I didn't want to do dishes. That was literally it. I'd come home after a long-ass Monday at work, dumped my bag by the door, and stared blankly at my kitchen sink like it had personally wronged me. I was too tired to cook and too lazy to clean up after cooking, so I opened that new delivery app my coworker wouldn't shut up about, some local startup that supposedly paid drivers better or whatever. The food didn't even matter. I picked a Thai place, hit order, and threw myself on the couch to scroll through the black hole that is my FYP. About 30 minutes later, I got the notification. Julian is on his way with your order. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I got the follow-up. Julian is approaching your door. That's when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and paused. He wasn't what I expected. Julian was tall, maybe 6 feet 1 inch or so, and built like someone who worked out casually but consistently. He wore a black hoodie with the sleeves pushed up and dark jeans that clung just right. His hair was kind of messy, in a deliberate, I woke up hot kind of way, and his eyes, dark brown, almost black, met mine with this little flicker of interest. Or amusement. I wasn't sure which. "You Ryan?" he asked, holding out the paper bag. Yeah," I said, taking it from him. "Thanks, man." He didn't walk away right away. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "Sorry, this is kind of weird, but could I ask a favor? I just had 3 deliveries canceled back to back, and I haven't eaten since noon. Would you mind if I sat down for like 10 minutes and scarfed down some leftovers I've got in the car? I can even eat outside." I blinked. "You want to eat here?" He raised both hands. "I swear I'm not trying to be creepy. I just need a break, and you seemed chill." I don't know why I said yes. Maybe it was the way he asked, like he didn't expect me to say yes. Or maybe it was that look in his eyes. But I nodded. "Yeah, sure," I said. "I mean, I've got a couple beers in the fridge, if you want one." That's how Julian, my delivery guy, ended up sitting at my kitchen table eating cold lo mein while we both sipped on beers and talked about how much Mondays sucked. It should have ended there, but it didn't, because the next night, I ordered again. Same app, same restaurant. And guess who got assigned my delivery? Julian. When he showed up, he just grinned. "Didn't peg you as the kind of guy who'd repeat order Patsy, ew." I shot back. "Didn't peg you as the kind of guy who remembers my order." That night, he didn't ask to stay. I offered. He did. And we talked again. Longer this time. And from then on, every few nights, I'd coincidentally order food right around the time I figured he'd be working. And he kept showing up. Until one night, something shifted. He didn't just deliver food. He delivered something else. It had been 2 weeks since that first delivery. By then, Julian had brought me food 5 separate times. And every time, he stayed a little longer. The first couple times it was just casual, talk about work, funny app stories, his side hustle doing tattoos. But gradually, it became less about the food and more about the visits. The weird thing? I started timing my orders just to align with when I thought he might be on shift. It wasn't planned, not consciously, but I'd wait till 7:30 instead of ordering at 6. Or I'd scroll through different restaurants just to make sure I picked one that used the same courier group. And somehow, every damn time, he ended up with my order. I tried to convince myself I wasn't hoping for anything, that he was just a friendly guy, and I was just enjoying the company. I even told myself that maybe he just didn't have many friends in the city, which might have been true, but I knew what I was doing, and I knew how I felt when I saw his name pop up again. That night, though, was different. He came in like usual. Same knock, same smirk. But his hoodie was off, and he was wearing a fitted long-sleeve tee that hugged his chest a little too well. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered, and he smelled faintly of cedar and clean laundry. "I added an extra spring roll," he said, handing me the bag. "Wow," I said, taking it. "You trying to bribe me for a 5-star rating?" He grinned. "Nah, just figured you look like the spring roll type." We both knew it was an excuse. I let him in. He didn't wait to be invited this time. He dropped his backpack by the couch and flopped down like it was his place, grabbing the remote and flipping to some low-budget sci-fi movie I'd never heard of. "You hungry?" I asked, heading to the kitchen. "I could eat," he said casually. "But you first. You paid." I brought the food to the coffee table, cracked open 2 beers, and sat down next to him. We ate in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable. We'd gotten used to each other, the way he leaned back on the cushions, one ankle over his knee. The way I always ended up sitting too close and pretending it was because there wasn't much room on the couch. About halfway through the movie, I caught him looking at me. Not in a casual, glancing kind of way. He was watching me. "What?" I asked, mouthful of noodles. Julian shrugged, then tilted his head. "You always this quiet?" "I've talked to you more than anyone this week," I said. He nodded, then took a long sip of beer. "Can I ask you something?" His voice had shifted. Softer, slower. "Sure." "You gay?" I froze. Not because I was ashamed or hiding. I was out. Always had been. But I didn't expect him to ask it. Not like that. Not so direct. And especially not with that look in his eyes. Steady, unreadable, almost too calm. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Is that going to be a problem with your spring roll delivery service?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No. Just wondered." He looked away, like he was deciding whether to say more. He didn't. He just leaned back into the couch again and went quiet. The air in the room changed. That charged, too aware of your own body kind of quiet. Neither of us moved. I heard the characters on the TV arguing in the background. But I wasn't paying attention anymore. I was hyper-aware of the space between us. Or more accurately, how small that space had become. Then, as casually as if he was asking for the remote, Julian said, "You ever have a close with someone who wasn't out?" I blinked. That wasn't casual. "Yeah," I said carefully. "It wasn't great. Felt like I was someone's secret." He nodded slowly, not looking at me. "I get that," he said after a second. "That's not what I want." "What do you want?" I asked. Julian looked at me. Really looked at me. And then he said something I didn't expect. "I don't know yet. But I think I want to figure it out. With you." I swear my pulse skipped. Before I could even process it, he was closer. He hadn't moved fast. It wasn't dramatic. But suddenly, his leg was touching mine, and the space between our faces had shrunk to almost nothing. "Can I?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. And that was the first time he kissed me. It wasn't perfect. He was hesitant, like he wasn't sure how to do it. But it was warm and real, and his hand on the back of my neck made my whole body light up. He didn't stay the night, but when he left, he didn't just say, "Later," like usual. He turned in the doorway, eyes dark and serious. "I'll be back tomorrow." And he was. True to his word, Julian showed up the next night. But this time, he wasn't holding takeout. He knocked like usual, and when I opened the door, there he was. Same hoodie, same soft smirk, but with empty hands. "Didn't order anything," I said, even though I already knew why he was there. "Yeah," he said, eyes flicking down then back to mine. "Just delivering myself tonight." I stepped aside to let him in. He walked past me, that quiet confidence still intact, but there was a nervous edge to him I hadn't noticed before. The kind of energy that comes when you've already crossed a line and are now waiting to see if it was a mistake. He didn't kiss me right away. He just dropped onto the couch, pulled a throw pillow into his lap, and glanced at me like, "So, now what?" I sat down next to him. Neither of us reached for the TV. Neither of us touched our phones. We just sat there, the silence stretching, but not in a bad way. It felt heavy, like the space between us was packed full of all the things we didn't quite know how to say. "I thought about that kiss all day," Julian said finally, staring at the coffee table. My throat went dry. "Yeah?" He nodded. "Not because I regretted it," he added quickly, "but Because it felt different. I leaned back, resting my arm along the top of the couch. How so? He looked at me then. Like it mattered. We sat with that for a second. I haven't really done this before, he added, voice low. Like, been into a guy. Or been honest about it. I didn't want to make it heavier than it already felt, but I also didn't want to pretend it was nothing. So I said, you don't have to know everything yet. He smiled. Small, grateful. That's good. Because I don't. We stayed like that for a bit. Close, but not touching. Both of us trying to figure out where this was going. Then Julian shifted closer. This time, I met him halfway. The kiss was slower, less hesitant. His hand came to rest lightly on my thigh, just enough pressure to make my skin tingle. He smelled like the same faint cedar and soap mix as before, and I found myself leaning into it, into him. When we pulled apart, he didn't move away. He stayed close, forehead resting lightly against mine. You're the only person I felt like I could be like this with, he whispered. And I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything, I said. Just be here. And he was. He stayed late that night. Not overnight, but later than before. We lay on the couch, limbs tangled, watching some indie horror movie neither of us followed. He rested his head on my chest, his breath warm against my shirt. I ran my fingers through his hair without even thinking about it. When he finally sat up, the clock read 1:12 a.m. Shit, he mumbled. I have a shift at 9. You want to stay? I asked, not even sure what I meant by that. Stay the night? Stay in this moment? He hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet, he said, but soon. He kissed me once more before leaving. Just a quick one. Like we were already something. Like it was normal. And maybe it was starting to be. By the end of that week, Julian had officially stopped being just my delivery guy. He still worked for the app, but he didn't bring food to my door anymore. Now he came by after shifts, or on nights off. Sometimes he'd show up sweaty from the gym, a duffel slung over one shoulder, already half smiling. Sometimes he came in with both hands full, one with Thai takeout, the other with a 6-pack of cheap craft beer. It was good, better than good. It was simple, easy, and completely surreal. I'd never had something like this with someone who wasn't fully out, but Julian was open in ways I hadn't expected. He wasn't hiding me, at least not in private. He asked questions, real ones, about what dating guys had been like for me, about when I knew, about how I handled coming out to my parents. Sometimes his questions caught me off guard, not because they were invasive, but because they were so honest. What if I'm not gay? He asked once, lying with his head in my lap, my fingers tangled in his hair. You don't have to be, I said. You can just be into me. He looked up at me, eyes soft, and said, I think that's exactly it. The more time we spent together, the less nervous he seemed. And the more we started falling into routines, his toothbrush quietly appearing in my bathroom, him stealing my hoodie and pretending he hadn't, me adding spicy tofu to the grocery list because he said it smacked way harder than it should. One Saturday afternoon, we were cooking together. Or I was. He mostly leaned against the counter and taste-tested stuff that wasn't ready yet. You ever think about bringing a guy home? He asked, nonchalantly, popping a roasted Brussels sprout into his mouth. I glanced at him, reading his tone. Not really, I said. Not unless it's serious. Julian nodded slowly. Would you bring me? My hands paused mid-chop. You want to meet my parents? He shrugged, eyes avoiding mine. I don't know. Maybe. Someday. I set the knife down, wiped my hands on a towel, and stepped closer. I'd bring you, I said, but only if you wanted to go. He looked up then, his usual easy charm replaced with something more vulnerable. I think I would. That's when I knew this wasn't casual anymore, and if I had any doubts, they disappeared the night I met his brother. It happened by accident. We were grabbing bubble tea after his shift, still sweaty and underdressed for the wind that had picked up. Julian had his hoodie pulled up, trying to fight the chill, when a guy around our age approached us with a curious squint. "Julian?" Julian froze. "Damn, it is you," the guy said. "What the hell, man? I thought you moved to Denver." "Ben," Julian said flatly. "You too? What is this? Who's this?" Ben asked, nodding toward me. Julian's jaw flexed. He opened his mouth like he was about to dodge the question. Then he said, "This is Ryan, my boyfriend." I blinked. I hadn't expected that word. Not yet. Ben's eyes widened. "Oh," a pause. Then Ben clapped him on the shoulder. "Good for you, man." Julian gave a small, tight smile. "Thanks." We didn't talk much on the ride back. The car was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. Once we were inside, I turned to him. "Boyfriend?" Julian didn't look away. "Yeah, that okay?" I smiled, slow and sure. "Yeah," I said. "It's more than okay." I didn't ask Julian to call me his boyfriend. He just did it, like he'd been turning it over in his mind and decided that's what we were. No announcement, no define the relationship talk, just a statement, casual but certain, like it had been true for a while, and he was finally saying it out loud, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Boyfriend. It's a small word, but it hit like a freight train. We didn't suddenly become more dramatic or clingy after that. There weren't fireworks or some big shift in energy. If anything, it just made things more comfortable. He kissed me without hesitation now, without checking over his shoulder. He'd grabbed my hand when we were walking back from the store. He stopped pulling away when our knees touched on the couch. We were figuring it out together. The weird part? It was the little things that started getting to me. Not the kisses, not the hand-holding, but the way he'd open the fridge and drink straight from the orange juice carton, or the way he'd fall asleep mid-movie with his head on my thigh and start snoring softly, or how he'd say my name when I wasn't looking, like he just wanted to see how it felt in his mouth. He wasn't out to the world, not yet, but to me, he was entirely present. One night, while we were lying in bed, half tangled under the sheets, he rolled onto his side and propped himself up on one elbow. "You think people can tell?" he asked. I glanced over. "Tell what? That I'm into you when we're out?" I shrugged. Maybe not." He looked thoughtful. "I hope they can." That threw me off. "You want them to?" He nodded slowly. "Not all people, just the ones who matter." I rested a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath my palm. "They will, when you're ready." He was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "You make it feel easy." That hit harder than I expected, because for someone like Julian, someone who'd spent years not really letting himself even think about this, saying it felt easy meant everything. "I'm glad," I said quietly. We kissed, slow and sleepy, like we had all the time in the world. A few days later, he did something I didn't see coming. He sent me a text. "Julian, home early. You around?" Me. "Yeah. Come by." 20 minutes later, he showed up with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a slightly nervous look on his face. "What's up?" I asked, letting him in. He stepped inside, kicked off his shoes, and said, "So I got offered a full-time gig." I blinked. "At the delivery app?" He shook his head. "Nah, tattoo shop. The one I've been helping out at. They want me full-time. Better pay. Actual benefits." "Dude, that's amazing," I said. "You gonna take it?" He looked down at the floor for a second. "I think so, but there's more." That's when I noticed the duffel. "You moving in?" I asked, half joking. He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "Not fully, but I was wondering if I could stay here a few nights a week, just to save on the commute. And also, I want to." I stared at him. "You want to stay here more because of the commute?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Julian cracked a smile. "Okay, and also because I sleep better next to you." That got me. "Yeah," I said, stepping closer. "You can stay as much as you want." He nodded, but he looked nervous, like he wasn't sure if I meant it. I leaned in and kissed him. You don't have to ask. And just like that, it felt even more real. Julian, the guy who used to just bring me food, was now bringing a bag of his stuff over like it was the most normal thing in the world. Because maybe it was. Maybe this was just what we were now. The first night Julian stayed over officially, with a duffel bag and everything, it felt like we were playing house. He tossed his stuff into the corner like it belonged there, kicked off his shoes, and immediately pulled off his hoodie. Underneath, he was wearing a faded old Blink 182 t-shirt that I hadn't seen before. It looked slept in, like it was his comfort shirt. The kind of thing someone only wears when they feel safe. That detail hit me harder than I expected. He cooked that night. And I don't mean reheating leftovers. No, Julian actually cooked. It wasn't anything fancy. Pasta with jarred sauce, some garlic bread from the freezer, but watching him move around my kitchen like he knew where everything was, that did something to me. Like we'd quietly shifted from hanging out to building a life. He even cleaned up without me asking. And when we ended up on the couch, full and sleepy, he reached for me with this automatic ease. His arm went around my shoulders, his fingers playing with the hem of my sleeve like he'd done it 100 times before. "You sure I'm not overstaying my welcome?" he asked, half mumbling into my neck. "If anything," I said, "you're not staying enough." He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders softening. That was the night we slept together for the first time. Not just chillin', slept. Real, arms around each other, breathing in sync, too warm but don't care sleep. The kind where you wake up in the middle of the night, still tangled up, and instead of moving apart, you move closer. And in the morning, I made us both coffee, and watched him wander sleepily into the kitchen, hair sticking up and wearing just his boxers, looking like he'd always lived here. After that, things just stayed good. He came over more often. His toothbrush lived in the bathroom now. Half his socks started showing up in my laundry. I caught myself calling it our place without thinking. One night, while we were brushing our teeth together, I said, "Do you still deliver?" Julian looked at me in the mirror and smirked through the foam. "Not food." I bumped him with my elbow. "I meant, do you still work shifts?" He spit into the sink, rinsed his mouth, then shrugged. "Nah, I took the tattoo shop job. It's official now." I smiled. "So no more dumpling deliveries at 8 p.m.? He grinned. "Only if you ask nicely." It was a joke, but there was something sweet about it. That the thing that brought us together, the random food delivery, was now just backstory. A weird, unexpected origin story for whatever this had become. A few weeks later, we were at the grocery store, just another regular errand. Julian was holding the basket. I was scanning the spice rack. Then he said, out of nowhere, "What's your favorite thing about this?" I glanced at him. "About what?" "This," he said, nudging my arm. "Us being together." It took me a second to think about it. I think, I started slowly, "it's how normal it feels." He nodded. "Like, I didn't expect this, at all," I said. "You just showed up one night with noodles, and now you're in my life." Julian leaned in a little, voice low. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. But I'm not going anywhere." The words settled in my chest like something solid. Something true. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I looked over at him, bare-chested, reading some crime novel he said he'd started 3 times and never finished. "What would you have done," I asked, "if I hadn't let you in that night?" He didn't look up. "Come back with more spring rolls until you caved." I laughed, nudging his foot with mine under the blanket. And just like that, I knew. Julian wasn't just a guy who delivered food. He was the delivery I didn't know I'd been waiting for. We never had a big defining moment after that. No dramatic declarations, no public coming out scene, no fight or fallout or grand resolution. Instead, we had nights where Julian fell asleep with his head on my chest, and I'd lie there thinking, how did this happen? We had mornings where he'd stand behind me brushing his teeth while I tried to make coffee with one eye open. We had afternoons where we grocery shopped like an old couple and argued about which brand of oat milk was less offensive. Somehow, the quiet routine became the thing I looked forward to the most. He still didn't talk much about his family. I knew his mom was in another state. I knew his dad wasn't around. He'd mentioned an older brother, Ben, the guy we ran into outside the tea shop, but he hadn't really opened that door again, and I didn't push. Because sometimes love isn't about prying things open. Sometimes it's just about being there when they're ready. One Sunday night, we were sitting on the floor playing cards, some dumb drinking game he'd insisted on teaching me. We were halfway through our second beer, knees touching, shirts rumpled, and hair a mess. Julian looked up, quiet for a second, and said, "You know I wasn't supposed to get your delivery that first night?" I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah. It got rerouted to me last minute. Someone else bailed." I tilted my head. "So what, fate?" He shrugged, eyes on me. "Maybe." Then, more softly, "Whatever it was, I'm glad it happened." He leaned in, kissed me, slow and unhurried, like we had forever. And maybe we did. Months passed. Julian moved in for real. Not all at once. But his drawer turned into a closet. His overnight bag disappeared. He started leaving his shoes by the door and his favorite mug on the counter. He got a promotion at the tattoo shop. More clients, better hours. He started designing flash sheets at night, sometimes asking me what I thought of a certain line or shade. I'd nod, pretending I understood any of it, just to keep him talking. And every now and then, we'd still joke about it. "You remember that app?" I'd say. "The one that brought me to you?" He'd reply. I'd roll my eyes, and he'd grin like the sap he secretly was. One night, we were sitting on the fire escape, legs dangling, the city quiet for once. Julian turned to me and said, "You know what I like most about this?" I looked at him. "That it's ours," he said. "No one else gets it, just us." And he was right. No one else knew what it felt like to open the door expecting pad see ew and get something so much better. Something warm, something real, something that stayed. So yeah, I signed up for a food delivery service, but what showed up at my door that night? That was the best delivery I've ever gotten.